Suet Sivahonot and Sivity. If you used to be Amish, that intro, that song, quite possibly triggered some feelings in you. Maybe some bittersweet feelings, some of good memories, some of bad, some of just kind of a lost life. Anyway, that song is always the second song sang in an Amish church service. It's called the Loop. What is it about? I have no idea. I do not know what the lyrics say, although I've heard it over and over. It's sung in German and not Pennsylvania Dutch, which is a language we speak. So Amish people have church every other Sunday, and they take turns hosting it at their house. Church starts at 9 o'clock on Sunday, and it ends usually around 12 o'clock. And then people will mingle and hang out for another couple hours and then go home. Having church at your house is it's a pretty big deal, and you start preparing for it weeks ahead of time. The men, they'll start cleaning out the barn, cleaning out all the cobwebs, and organizing all the tools. Just taking, usually what we did was we took everything out of the barn and we cleaned it, swept it, and we put everything back nice and neat. And the yard gets manicured, the leaves get raked, the flower beds get done up really nice. The men will set up a hitching line so that when the church members do come, they have somewhere to tie their horses to, and they'll have hay out there for them. On the other side, the women, they start cleaning the house. They've already canned pickles and beets. We'll start cleaning the house, and even a couple days before that Sunday, the neighbor ladies will get together and they will clean the house top to bottom. Like every wall, every ceiling gets scrubbed. Furniture, sofas, couches, they all get taken outside and shampooed and aired out. The china cabinet gets cleaned out, and all the dishes get scrubbed. Inside the cabinets, everything's cleaned. And they have fun doing it. The fellowship of it. You don't want a bunch of people showing up at your house and notice a dirty house. So this is in my community anyway. I don't know how some of those stricter communities, the more conservative ones, I'm not sure how they do it. They weren't, I don't think, as clean as our community. Like, they only took a bath once a week. We took showers every day. So I don't know how their houses looked. I've never been in one. Full disclosure, this is how we do it in the Northern Indiana Amish community. I have to keep saying this because people keep thinking that we're all the same, and it's not. It's not the case. Like, Amish people are different. The funniest thing is when non-Amish people are on the Facebook groups telling Amish people how Amish people live. I find that comical, because so everything's prepared for weeks ahead of time. The peanut butter is made, the cheese is ordered, the bench wagon is brought over from the previous person's house who had church. They'll maybe with a tractor or with a team of horses, they'll pull the bench wagon over. And Saturdays, the men usually will bring in all the benches and set it up. They'll set them up. So a lot of people in our community now have big shop areas where they would park their buggies in, but they're big enough to host a church. So they'll set the benches up so that the ladies can sit on one side, the men can sit on the other. Years ago when I was a kid, there was summer places that didn't have a house big enough to host it in there, so they would do it in the summertime in their like farm shed where they kept the implements, or even in the barn loft, or and then we didn't have a big barn, so in the winter times we would have it in the basement, or we even had it upstairs in our house. But the benches would be set up so the women can sit on one side and the men on the other, and the preacher could kind of stand in the middle so everybody could hear him. And then it's ready for Sunday morning. So Sunday morning comes around, and Amish people have a strict dress code, obviously. So the men always will dress in black or dark gray pants with a white shirt, and then they'll have a what they call a mutza suit, or a jacket that they wear, usually with a vest underneath. And the boys, in the summertime, the young boys won't wear the jacket. They'll just wear the black pants and a white shirt with suspenders, and obviously the black hats. And then the women, they have dresses. In our community, they were allowed to wear different color dresses to church, although they were stuck with the not so bright colors for Sundays. They would wear reds and oranges and whatever during the week, but on Sundays they would wear the darker colored dresses. Sunday mornings, everybody would be getting around, getting dressed, making sure everything's looking good. The head covering's good, and the dresses are looking good, and the shoes are clean and shined, and they would load the family up in the buggy, and they would head to wherever the church is at. And they would pull into the churchyard, and usually the men are out by the barn standing in a circle waiting for church to begin. But the families would pull in, and the men would turn the horse to the one side, which meant the wheel would turn the wheel away from his wife's side of the buggy, so that she could get out without getting her dress all dirty. And the kids would climb out. The girls go with mom, the boys go with dad. So dad would then drive out to the field usually, or the lawn, unhitch the horse, take him over to that hitching line, rail, whatever, or inside the barn if it's big enough, and would tie up his horse in there where it could chomp on hay for all day. And then the man would come in, and he would start that circle of men. He would start at one end, and he would go through each man, doing a handshake and giving him the holy kiss. Don't ask me what the holy kiss is. I don't know why. I don't know why they believe in doing the holy kiss thing. I don't know. I don't even know what it's mentioned in the Bible, but I'm not sure what it means. I haven't really ever looked into that. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if the guys actually touched. I don't think they touched lips. I'm not sure. I was never a part of that since I was never married. Only the married men do that. So only the married men walk through that line shaking hands and doing that. All the little boys up to a certain age, I can't remember what it was, 5, 6. I just can't remember. They stay with their dad. They go with their dad, and they stand with their dad. And anybody older than that hangs out with the rest of the boys, who are usually in a separate part of the barn, just hanging out and waiting for the host to come get them to seat them. Now, I'm assuming the women are doing a similar thing in the house. However, I don't know. I was never in there, so I don't know how they handled things. But they were always in the house, the women and the girls. Sometime a little bit before 9 o'clock, the host of the place would start sitting people. So he would start with the ministers, and he would put them in the front. Then he would skip a couple benches, and then the rest of the married men would file in by age and sit down according to age on one side of the room. In the meantime, all the women were filing in and sitting on the other side of the room by age too. So the older sat up front, and the younger ones sat in the back. Maybe that was so they could hear the preacher better. I'm not sure. Or it was just a way of doing things. It's kind of when you went out to dinner at somebody else's house with big groups of Amish people, you would always, like, the kids would eat, and then the men would start eating by age. Like they would file through the line to fix their plates by age instead of, yeah, that's just how it was done. A lot of the things were done by age. I keep saying by age. There you go. Keep hearing it. So the men are all seated. The women have come in and been seated, and now the girls, the young girls that don't have to sit with their mom anymore, they will file in by age, one by one. This is all regimented, like it happens the same in every church district, and it's like so regimented. Maybe not that it has to be, but that's just how it is. Like, and if when you're walking into a church, everybody's watching, and you don't want to mess up. You don't want to have something out of order, like your head covering. You don't want to look, your head covering. You want that on right. You want your dress and your belt to be perfect, so you can look as good as you can, because everybody's watching as you're coming in. So the girls file in, and they sit up, usually up front somewhere, closer to the preachers. And then last, they would bring in the boys from the barn, and they would also come in by age, usually by the single boys who aren't married but have joined the church. They will come in first, and then all the other younger boys that still aren't members of the church, that aren't 16 years of age yet. So, and they would all file in and usually shake hands with the preachers, and then we would have to sit in the front. And I think we sat in the front so that all of our fathers could keep an eye on us and keep us out of trouble. So then at 9 o'clock, the bishop of that church would call out that church is starting. And a person who kind of takes care of songs calls out a page of a song, and then he picks on somebody in the congregation to start singing that song. And what that is one person, just a church member, he sings the first word of the line, and then the rest of the church joins in. So, and as you heard it in the song, the Loblied, right? There's one person singing the first word, then everybody else joins in for the rest of that line, and then he does the next line, he does that first word again, and everybody joins, and so on. And the songs are all written in German. They pick these songs out of the Osbund. It's a book full of German songs written by the Anabaptists who were martyred, right, or who were going through persecution. They were writing these songs as they were sitting in jails or hiding or whatever. So, and they're all serious. Like Amish church services is you don't see a lot of smiling. You don't see a lot of joy and happiness. It's all very solemn and serious, right? You're here. This is God's time, and there's not to be a whole lot of joking around and stuff. It's yeah. So they sing a song, and then when that's over, they do the same thing with the Loblied, which is the second song, always the second song in a service every Sunday. The other songs change from Sunday to Sunday. I don't know how they choose those. Yep. So they do the second song, then they do the third song, and in the meantime, right after the first song started, all the preachers and the visiting preachers went out to a separate room as where they, I think, pray and go over some things, and they discuss who is going to preach that day. So as a minister, you show up to church on Sunday and you don't know if you're going to preach or not. You can kind of have an idea because the person who went the longest without preaching on a Sunday will be the one preaching that day. So if it's gone quite a bit of Sundays without you preaching, then your turn might be up. Just depends on who's there. So they decide who's going to preach that day. There's two people that preach and another person who reads scripture. So they sing 3 or 4 songs. The ministers come back in, sit down. They finish the song they're on, whether that's the 3rd or 4th song. And then the first preacher stands up and starts preaching. Those songs are sung slow, and it takes a long time. And I never experienced it, a church really, as an adult or a married adult. I never, I just never really experienced the Amish church like most married Amish people who have left. You can go watch my testimony. It's the first video I did on this channel. But it drug on. Like, it was like a lot of us boys, we would put our hands down on our knees and we would fall asleep. Those benches were so uncomfortable. Sometimes just out of boredom, we would follow along in the books. Obviously our parents would have wanted us to sing, but we didn't care. We didn't understand a single word, right? Or not many words. Because we spoke a Pennsylvania Dutch, and the church songs and the Bible reading was out of German, which is a different language. So anyway, songs were over. Preacher stood up and he started preaching, and if it was an older preacher, he would know more German. So a lot of what he preached was in German, which we also had a hard time understanding. We always liked when a younger guy preached, because he didn't know as much German and we could understand him better. And he did his preaching, and we would pray. Like, we would kneel down. When it was time to pray, we would turn around, kneel down on our benches and pray. And then we would stand up and scripture would be read. The men would face the preacher when we stood up. For some reason, the women faced away from the preacher when those prayers were being said. I don't know why. Any of you ex-Amish know why, let me know in the comments. That's just how it was. It could get a little awkward when you're facing this way and there's a row of ladies over here facing this way. It's like, But this is how it was. And usually after the first time we prayed and stood up, that was kind of a break time where we could go outside and use the bathroom. So the men would run out. We go out to the bathroom and use the bathroom and use the barn as a bathroom. And the women obviously use the house. And then we would all come back in, and the second preacher would stand up and preach, and then some more praying. But after that first little break or prayer, the lady of the house would come out with cookies and crackers and pretzels, and pass it around the families with the little kids, just as a little snack to keep them, from getting too hungry, keep them, a little bit more occupied. Because the whole family was sitting in there. And these little 3-4-year-old kids, they kind of get they don't want to sit still for 3 hours. It's hard for them, but they did. The little kids brought toys, little tractors and dolls that they could play with while church was going on. And us boys who weren't sitting with our dad, we would always look at those crackers and pretzels and be hungry, and we wouldn't necessarily be allowed to have any unless the guy hosting was cool and he would send it down our row, which didn't happen that often. But anyway, so yeah, church kept on praying, preaching. After both preachers were done and scripture was read, the bishop would ask for teknis. I don't know what that word means translated to English, but what he was doing was he would ask the other preachers or men of the congregation who hadn't preached that day to kind of give their testimony, kind of share with what they heard, and if all they heard was good and biblical, right? And they all usually agreed. I don't think I've ever heard anybody disagree what was being said on a Sunday. And then another song would be sung, and then church was over. If there was somebody who had to confess their sins, or if there was church, there needed to be some discussions made where only the members of the church should be involved. After the last song was sung, all the members, the baptized members of the Amish church, would stay in the the room, and everybody else had to leave. So usually just the kids left. And so they could discuss their church things without ears that it shouldn't be there. Then when church is done, us boys and the girls, us boys separately from the girls, we would go play. Usually it was basketball. We would go play until we were called for lunch. So after church, all the men would take these benches that we sat on, and they had little leg adapter things, and they would set 2 benches up on these little legs, and then have 2 benches on either side of that, and the women would spread out tablecloths, and then the food would be brought in. All the women would be helping. The men would be setting up the benches, and then they would usually call us boys because we were always the hungriest, and we sat in a table. The ministers, the preachers sat in a table, and there's usually a couple tables for the women, and we would eat, and usually it would take 2 rounds of tables to feed everybody. But yeah, we would just sit in a row and be sitting there with all the pickles and the beets and the peanut butter spread, which is so good, and the breads and a glass of water, no plates, just knives and forks, knives and forks, I think. And we would sit there waiting, and then when the tables were full, the bishop would make his call. He would say, "When the dish is full, will still hold a gebet." And everybody would go quiet in prayer, and we would pray. And then as soon as the bishop would shuffle his feet or clear his throat or something, we knew the prayer was over, and we would start eating. That is a kind of that's a common way to pray in the Amish community. Even if you're out eating dinner or something, you will just bow your heads and you will pray silently. Nobody actually says a prayer, although my grandpa did. I wonder why that went to the wayside. But he used to pray out loud for everybody, which was good. So yeah, we would eat beets and pickles and bread. We would just take the bread and we'd put this peanut butter spread on there. It's peanut butter, marshmallow cream, and some other ingredients. It's so good, so sweet, so good. And then the ladies who were helping serve would pass plates of sliced cheese, Colby Jack, cheddar, whatever, down to us. And we would take a slice or 2, and we'd be eating for a while. The men would get their coffees. The women would serve them coffee. Unless they just had coffee. No, they had coffee sitting on the table. And when we were done, we would pray again, and we would escape. Us boys would run out and play. But one thing, I always remember sitting in a row, you have this canvas tablecloth, and it hangs over the edge a little bit. So we would poke the guy next to us on either side of us, and we would curl that tablecloth up and make a rain gutter. And then we would take a glass of water and we would dump it in there, and we could, depending on how long the gutter is, we could shoot that water down the table, because this was like 14, 16 foot long tables, right? So we'd shoot that water down to an unsuspecting person who would then end up with a bunch of water in his lap. Just a little prank we played. After we were done, we would escape. We would go play. The women would clear the table and set it up again for the next batch of people. And, cookies. They always sent cookies at the end. Delicious cookies, homemade cookies. It was really good. The rest of the adults, they're married. They just kind of usually, some of them went home after lunch. Some of them mingled and just chatted, fellowshipped. About 2, 3 o'clock, popcorn would be brought out. I hope that kind of gives you a glimpse into an Amish church service. Now, Joseph Graber, I don't know, I keep wanting to call him Peter. Joseph Graber did a video series, 6-part series, called Breaking the Silence, My Amish Story. You guys need to go watch it if you haven't seen it. He does a fantastic job. He was raised Amish, is now a filmmaker, and he actually got, I think in his first part, in the part 1 of 6, he actually got a bunch of old order Amish people or ex-Amish people together to, I think, grow out beards and dress Amish to reenact a church service. So it's on YouTube, it's on Amazon, Breaking the Silence, My Amish Story. Go watch that. You'll kind of, then you can get a visual of what it kind of looked like. I don't have any footage of anything like that. Nobody will ever, or shouldn't ever, be filming inside an actual church service. So that film is the best way to get a glimpse of that and see what it's actually kind of like. One of my next videos will be about what the preachers taught on Sundays and how they preach, what their sermons were kind of like. And so if you guys are interested in watching that, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon so that it notifies you of my future videos coming up. Hit the like button, subscribe, share this video. I appreciate you guys taking the time watching them. Just keep us in your prayers, and we will see you next time.